franchise companies that were very proactive in the changes that they made instead of the reactive ones were ultimately the ones that thrived. If you're just reacting, it's like a fire. The fire is already going. If you know that there's a high probability of the fire starting, you can
Mhm.
take measures to make sure that the fire doesn't start.
You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. Hi, and welcome back. Today, I'm joined by Sally Facinelli, a growth strategist, franchise operator, and advisor known for helping emerging brands scale through stronger systems, leadership, and operational alignment. With nearly 30 years of experience across franchising, business development, operations, and leadership, Sally has worked with franchisors, franchisees, founders, and multi-unit operators to build brands that grow sustainably, not just quickly. Sally brings a practical, operator-focused perspective to growth and leadership. She's also currently working on a book, which we're hoping to see more of. At least I am looking forward to seeing potentially next year. Sally, welcome to the RevOps Champions podcast.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here.
So, Sally, you've worked with founders and franchise operators for decades. What separates, in your mind, brands that scale sustainably from those that grow too fast and break?
That's a great question to start with. I think one of the biggest things that you can do is pause. You have to sit there and you have to understand where it is that you're going. Okay. So
Mhm,
I know that I'm a brand that I want to sell. It could be dog grooming, it could be, waxing, whatever it is, doesn't matter.
mhm,
But you know where you want to go in the next 2 years, 5 years, whatever your growth plans are. And then you sit there and you pause and you go, okay, how is this? How could I get there intentionally? What steps
mhm.
can I take to do that? And you look at not only the steps that you can take, but the people. You got to get your people, the right people in there. How can you do that? That sort of thing. So I would start with doing that.
Mhm. I love that. In fact, I just heard another perfect example of that last week. A really successful brand out of California that's at 200 units, and we were checking in to see like what they were up to as far as like changing their systems in order to drive their scale. And it's like this is like some of the best, to your point, it's like the best news to hear back from them saying, actually, they've paused because they want to just make sure that they know what they're doing before they get ready to scale 300, 400, and 500 units, which I totally agree. That's really good advice.
Well, most people don't want to do the pause. They think that they're going to lose the momentum if they pause. But that's the
Mm.
thing. They're not going to lose momentum. They're going to be able to clearly see things. You don't have to pause forever. Just take a very intentional pause.
Right. Well, and I think to your point, the great thing about franchising, no matter where you are, and whether you're at 100 units or 200 units or 300 units, those units are still going to be operating while you're pausing. And part of what you're doing while you're pausing is making sure you can continue to support your existing franchisees, correct?
hmm Exactly. And if your plans are to, maybe change the business in some way to grow to that next level, because there are businesses, and I've seen a couple of them actually. One of my friends just did this radically with her business in the franchise world, and she took a very big detour because it wasn't very different from the business that she was already doing. It was in the same vein, but it was
Hmm.
the next stage. And she was looking at it going, hey, I see where the future of this is, health and wellness and beauty. I see where the future is going and I want to get there, but this is going to be a big change from where I'm at now with my current franchisees. Now, how do
Hmm.
I get there? And is that going to work? Can I still support the franchisees? Do I need to get them up to scale? Like, how do I work through this before I just go full steam ahead?
Yeah. Yeah. Which seems to be that sort of most consistent mindset shift that leaders have to make as they're breaking through these different ceilings of complexity, right? Which is very simple mindset. What got us here isn't going to get us to where we're going. And I
Percent.
think you touched on one, I think the most important point, which is the first thing that has to change when a brand hits one of those ceilings is potentially the leadership or the structure. You might not have to change the people on the leadership. You might have to add a person and maybe change the roles, but that's typically where the change has to happen. Otherwise, how do you continue to elevate the organization if you're trying to do it with the same people that got you to where you are, knowing that you're probably going to need different or at least more people to get you to where you're going?
Agreed, and I think a lot of people are afraid to do that within their company for a variety of reasons. They're either afraid that they may not know the right people, making changes in general is scary.
Hmm.
They might have a lot of connection with the people that they already have and, not taking them the whole way with them. And
Right.
you could do this right, but if you think that you can grow in the various stages of your business with the same people, you just won't grow because the people that are the founders that start 0 to whatever, 10 units, whatever, 25
Hmm.
units, a little
Yep.
different,
Yep.
very different person. The people that take you to 200 units and the unit numbers, these are not hard and fast numbers. It depends on the business, but that
Hmm.
take you there is going to be a different person that takes you to 1,000 or whatever, you know,
Exactly. Exactly.
very different.
Yeah. Yeah. I think these are all good reminders. And I'm sure that there are people listening who resonate with, we've all been through that stage where we've held on a little longer than we needed to, before making a
Natural.
change. Yes, exactly. So Sally, you've been heard to say something around the lines of growth doesn't create alignment problems, it exposes them. So where do you most often see alignment break down as organizations scale?
Well, so the scaling is what is exposing what's not there. So it could be a system. Like you don't have the right systems in place, or you had the right systems for when you were a different size, and now
Mm,
they need to be tweaked for when you grow or for the next phase. You don't have
right.
the right processes. The same thing. Same thing goes for systems and processes. It could be
Mhm,
technology systems, whatever the system is,
mhm,
those have to shift. And what people do is they get very comfortable with what they have in place and they expect that to just stay and go with them to the next level. It doesn't work that way.
yeah.
Unfortunately, you've got to be constantly doing that. And I think it can expose those two areas. It also exposes people. So again, with maybe you have the right people, maybe it's, not for the next stage, or maybe you have the right people, but not the right role,
Mhm,
or it could be simply miscommunication and misalignment. So if people don't have the same shared vision, if the leadership is not clearly defining their leadership, where they're going and sharing that, because I have a lot of leaders that I talk to, they don't tell their team the vision. And I'm like, why would you not want to tell your team the vision? Don't you all want to get there? You want them to be able to like actually help you get there quickly, in a
mhm,
scalable way that is sustainable as well. But they
mhm,
often keep it to themselves and they don't communicate. So I think that's another huge area that people really break down is lack of communication. Or they will communicate, but they won't communicate in a way that people understand and double check that they really understand what they're doing or what they're saying.
yeah, I mean, that is so true. So, Sally, so now once we sort of get through sort of the leadership challenges and making the changes as a business grows sort of from one level to the next thing that's really important is consistency. Right? So you just touched on communication, which again, if there's one thing that has to be consistent in an organization, it's communication. But if we just talk about consistency for a second, consistency is critical. So how do you balance standardizing the things that matter most while still giving operators and teams the flexibility to adapt and innovate?
I think you first have to standardize the most critical things to your business, like your brand experience. Again, depending what kind of brand or company that you have, brand experience has got to be always standardized. Who are
Hmm.
you as a company? What are things that you want your customers to experience? Those are very critical things to me. It's like Apple. You know what
Hmm.
you're gonna get with Apple. It is their brand experiences purely everybody knows what it's going to be, and that's
Right.
hugely important. I think that the customer experience is just part of that. And then metrics, of course, I think those are always important as far as standardizing what everybody is trying to live up to, what KPIs, those sorts of things. Because if you
Hmm.
don't know, then you can't live up to them if those aren't clearly stated. And then if you have leaders that you trust, first of all, if you don't have them, you need to get them. So
Hmm.
if you have the leaders that you trust and then you communicate with them, we all have the same shared vision. We know what we're trying to hit, what are our goals, those sorts of things. Now you
Hmm.
can get any experience of not only the customers, but let's talk employees too. We don't want to forget about those. But what
Hmm.
do we want our employees to experience, as part of our company? Now you can give them the freedom to go ahead and execute. And then that way they can execute much faster. They can even make tweaks, improve upon things, being creative, but they're all on the same page. So they
Hmm.
start on the same page and now they have flexibility.
So I want to just come back to that brand consistency for a second. So one of the things that we see a lot in franchising is too much focus goes onto brand dev and not as much on franchisee support, which includes giving franchisees the assets and tools to make sure that they can actually provide brand consistency. What do you think is going on there when a brand who has everything going for them and all they need to do is keep running that playbook of, upping their game to get from one level to the next, which includes brand consistency, which often starts lacking when they're growing too fast, right? So suggest that they maintain brand consistency while they're potentially growing at a high rate.
That's going to be a multi tier approach. So one is they do have to focus on franchisees, guidance and support. You can do that through FBCs, franchise business coaches. People call them little different names, but that's
Hmm.
basically one of the main names.
Yeah.
Franchise business coaches that can really help them stay brand consistent. Actually, being on as much boots on the ground with your franchisees as possible. I do think that one of the things, the bigger you get, the harder it is to do this. But as a leader, staying in understanding of what it is like on the ground in the trenches, that's really hard. So you need to actually go out there, be on the ground at least time to time. I know it's really
Mm,
hard when you have like a whole bunch of units, but as
sure.
much as possible. Otherwise, you have these people that they can then go out there and they're very much they've drank the Kool-Aid of your brand. They're very much, I want these franchisees to be successful. I'm going to go help them. I'm going to make sure they stay on brand standards. And then in addition to that, you need to offer them tools to do that. So if you
Hmm.
don't have tools to do that, there's a lot of things you can do and say, but if you don't have a lot of visual tools, how are you going to quantify? Are they actually not only staying on brand standards, like, yes, they've got the right lookup and they got the right napkins and they got the right, all that stuff. That's great. But
Hmm.
what about the brand standards as far as growth, revenue, those sorts of things?
Hmm.
And how do you measure that? So you need to give them tools to be able to do that.
Right. Which comes back to what you were saying about the metrics and the KPIs, because how do you manage what you cannot measure, right?
Right. Or
Uh,
can't see. And I think that's part of the other problem is leadership will have, and I know I've done this, but we'll have tools that we can see and we can
mhm.
see pretty quick, like red flags. You can start seeing something will shift and you can, if you know and you've been in the business long enough, you can start to see where that's going to go if it's not nipped in the bud. But
Yeah.
if a franchisee doesn't have access to the same data or similar, maybe they don't need the same data, they don't need to see everybody else's stuff, of course.
Sure.
That's not a thing we want. But
Hmm.
or even being able to have them benchmarked against other franchisees, things like that. If they can't see this, then they're running blind. So I think
Right.
that's really important to have that transparency.
And have it be in also in more real time. We often hear some version of, well, the franchisee was experiencing this issue 6 weeks ago, but we just found out about it today. I mean, in 2026, that really doesn't seem to be a good excuse. If you don't know what happened at the franchisee level 6 weeks ago, you should have that data readily available at any time, right?
Yeah. Well, 6 weeks ago, especially in the world of AI, I mean, AI has taken over. I've been talking about AI for like 6 years here.
Yes,
I'm
I'm
like,
sure.
so in this world, if we don't have that data real time, it's already old. It's, either the problem has grown massively
Hmm.
or it's gonna, something else has come in and added to the problem. It's now old data. It's now no longer relevant. And now you need new data to be able to
Yeah,
make the changes.
right. And you can no longer make decisions on that data because it's to your point, it's no longer relevant. It happened
Hmm.
6 weeks ago. So Sally, you emphasize that people don't need more direction, they need more clarity, right? From this, you talk about communication. So what does organizational clarity actually look like in practice?
Well, it goes back to, I think, what I was saying earlier with the clarity and sharing your vision. I think that's a huge part of it.
Hmm.
I do think that people get a job, they go work for a company, they know their little job, you know, they might understand, the people next to them and above them or whatever, but they know their little area. They don't necessarily understand the entire picture and what the company is trying to do. What are we trying to accomplish? Who are our customers? How are we trying to help them? In general, I find that people communicate. To me, it's all communication. It's like marketing 101. People
Hmm.
in general communicate, here, let me throw out my information on you and you're going to just accept it. You're going to buy my widget, you're going to do whatever. That's not how things work. You
Hmm.
need to communicate in a way that people can understand. And when you're at the top as a leader, if you're communicating in a way that they're just going like this, because what are they going to do? They're not going to say, oh, I don't get to, I don't understand. They're thinking they might look if they question you. And some people will question, which is great. But if you're not confirming that they actually understand and they have the clarity that you have and they can see your vision, but it could be simply because they're not hearing you the way that you're communicating,
Hmm.
you need to tweak it. You need to change it. You need to communicate it more than one way. You need to understand that everybody has the clarity that you have.
Right. And of course, I think the advice that I'm hearing there is make sure that the people that you're communicating with are hearing what you're saying by just
And
asking,
understanding.
yeah, just asking the question like, you know, can you kind of tell me what I just explained to you, kind of thing, just to make sure that they did get it, not that they're
Mhm.
just nodding their heads for whatever reason. Which is again, it probably speaks to more than just communication and clarity. It also is potentially a cultural thing, right? Where maybe there's something misaligned on the culture that people are for some reason too scared not to question, and they just say, yes, I understand what you're saying, but they don't really understand it, and then you wonder why things go off the rails.
Yeah. One of the things I ask when I am worried that somebody, and I've had this experience when I've had an employee that we were misaligned very big, and I unfortunately did not do this. I learned to do this through that,
Sure.
but I will ask some simple questions like, what are, and I might ask this in a different way depending on the situation, but what are you hearing me say? What does that mean to you? Because I do find that people words mean a lot of different things. The same word to a different
Hmm.
person might mean something completely differently. And I want
Sure.
to understand that they actually are on the same page. I'm like, wow, if I ask that kind of question and they come back over here, left base or right base in this case,
Hmm.
they're not on the same page, then I need to come back and I need to find a different way of communicating or, asking questions or, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, communication, to your point, is such a critical part of leadership, but it's such a widely misunderstood. I mean, leaders who get it, they get it, but those who haven't figured it out yet wonder why people don't seem to be hearing what they're saying. Yeah,
Hmm.
but obviously very critical if you want to scale. Sally, so you've seen firsthand how shared visibility can improve performance. So, what separates organizations that simply collect data from those that actually use it to drive better decisions?
So I think a lot of companies they collect the data and then they may not understand the data or what it's telling them. I find that a lot. Like we've got all this data. Okay, they might be overloaded on data and
Hmm.
but they have no idea what to do with it. And that actually is way more common than it should be. But if they
Hmm.
can actually put that data to a shared understanding of what the goal looks like that they're trying to go for, the future goal, a very clear, defined understanding of what they're going for. And the data means the same thing every single time. So if you're comparing bananas to a banana. You're not comparing them to, you know, grapes or something radically different. Now
Sure.
everybody understands, okay, I get the data, I see the data means this, and then you're using it every time. I think that's a great start. But the biggest problem is you can have systems. You need a system that will give you this data, the data that's actually important to your brand. Everybody
Hmm.
has the same data, of course, and use that. But if you have those right systems, you've got the data, you got the key indicators that you want to watch and you want to notate and have your business drive on. But then it's
Hmm.
also the adoption of that. Are you
Hmm.
using the same data points? But
Yeah.
are you using that same data point every single time? So now you
Hmm.
can have comparable things. I find that people don't adopt using those systems unless they're forced into it sometimes.
Yeah. We see that a lot. Just having a lot of data doesn't necessarily mean that you have the right data, to your point, to make the right decisions, right? And I think what we've seen also as brands go through these different phases of growth, the data that you're tracking when you're at 30 units or let's say under 100
Hmm.
units to the data that you're tracking when you're at 150 or 300 units, it's going to evolve, and it's going to be probably you're going to be tracking different data at different levels between corporate and franchisees or multi-unit franchisees that they're tracking different things. But I think that's one of the things that does, in addition to sort of leadership and of course processes that have evolved as the brand grows. I think the data does shift a little bit. Maybe at the unit level, the data stays the same. But as you're growing at a corporate level, there might be different data that you look at, and you want to make sure that your data is more defined, that you're tracking, let's say, three metrics versus trying to track 20 that really have no value to the organization.
Yeah, it's a little overkill too, and it's overwhelming, depending who you're talking to too, again, right? So it's all depending on who are we working with. So if it's the
Correct.
franchisees, they're going to definitely have a different set of data points. And as you grow, like you were saying, things shift and you're seeing the shift in your brand and you need to shift those data points with it. It could be your customer shifts. Now, people are like, oh, my customer never shifts. I'm a waxing company. Actually, your customer may shift. You've got to shift with that. And, you've got to watch those trend and those data points as well.
You touched on this a minute ago. There's going to be probably more shift coming pretty soon because of what's happening with AI. So maybe we'll still get into that here. But so over the course of your career, it's going to be 30 years this year. What's a leadership belief you've changed your mind about from where you started 20 or 30 years ago to where you are now?
So this one was a big one. So like when I first started, I really thought as a leader, I needed to understand every little detail of everything about the business, every little thing. Like I needed to, have done it all myself. And then I found out that, wait a minute, I don't need to know it all. I need to, of course, understand my business and I need to understand, all the key indicators of my business. The
Hmm.
most important thing is hiring people that are better than me at whatever it is I'm hiring them to do. And they have
Absolutely.
the answers, usually, if they're the experts. And then also, I find that the other biggest thing a leader can do that's second to hiring the right people is to ask questions. They know how to ask good questions. They don't have all the
Uh,
answers, but have the ability to ask really great questions. And then, oh, I get an answer, and now I learn how to ask a different question, and that can really lead me to where I need to go.
That's really good. I like that. Sally, so let's shift a little bit now to AI. So you've done a lot of different things within the franchise space over the last 30 years. You're sort of in the middle of taking a bit of a break until you figure out what's kind of next for you while you're also writing the book. But you're doing it at a really interesting time because of the impact that AI is going to have on all of us, including those of us in the franchise space. What are you most excited about as you think about sort of whatever is coming next, but how you think AI might impact the franchise space?
Hmm. What am I most excited about? I know so many people are scared about AI. They think it's going to take away their jobs, and it will take away some jobs. But it's also going to create other jobs. I'm most excited about okay, watching the franchise industry has always been really far behind the times as far as adoption to technology.
Hmm.
And this is the only thing I've seen. I mean, we're usually like 10 or so years behind. I have seen so many people just eat this up. And it's probably because we're all very entrepreneurial mindset. Everybody's just adopting this, eating it up really quickly. I think AI in general has so many use cases that we can use it in our entrepreneurial world, not only to understand our businesses better, to like, for me, I'm ADD, super ADD. I know a lot of other leaders are very ADD as well, but yeah, right. It will help us. I don't know if you've used it this way. I'll put some things in and I'm like, I just need you to help me organize my thoughts. Like I know what I want to say, and all my thoughts are like 100 of them all at once. And it kind
Sure.
of does this, puts them in a line for me, right? So just
Hmm.
helping align this a little bit better, or maybe like, hey, where are our gaps? So I think that to me is exciting. There's so
Hmm.
many exciting things about AI, though. I was talking about it 6 years ago on a podcast, and I was telling everybody then, I was like, "It's already here. You're already interacting with it, and you just don't know it. You think
Yeah.
it's a person you're interacting with." And that's like old news, and people are like,
Yeah.
just now seeing how amazing it is. So,
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think, one of the other, biggest shifts that I've seen in the last few months, and if so, let's just say even since like IFA, which was what now is it now 3 or 4 months ago, the biggest shift, which I think is also a positive one. So early this year, up until around IFA, you just touched on it. Like there was this big fear, and it
mm,
still exists, but I'm happy to see that it's changing. Where people were saying, "Well, AI is gonna take my job." Where what I'm seeing now coming from leadership teams across the spectrum is that's not the intention of leadership teams. Leadership teams are trying to figure out how to deploy and employ AI to make their people better, not to replace them.
right, more
Um,
efficient, right? More
exactly.
efficient. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean more crazy work, insane hours. More efficient just means like perfecting. It's like, anything else, you've got to perfect it, you know?
Yeah. Work. Yeah. Work on the things that only you can do as a human that AI isn't able to do. And why wouldn't you want to work on things that are more strategic and more valuable to your own career as well as the company, and let AI take care of the more sort of mundane tasks and things, which again have to be done by somebody, or in this case something. So why wouldn't you delegate that to AI, and so that you can focus your time on if you're more on the extroverted side, spend more time with people, adding
Mhm.
value to people, and let the AI do sort of the more mundane tasks.
100%.
Yeah. So Sally, so and then looking ahead, how do you think leadership and franchise growth models will evolve as businesses become more technology driven and complex?
Well, I've already seen this happening. They're already going to help it's gonna help them become more efficient, but drive more revenue growth. So maybe they're if you're a franchise location and you have a revenue cap of maybe what was a $500,000 before annually, maybe they're gonna now be able to find the holes of where those, what could be
Hmm.
stopping that growth or maybe something new. What could help them get more growth? It could be a new product, could be a new anything,
Yeah.
but it will help them with the revenue growth of an individual location. If you're looking at it from that perspective, I think that's one of the things that we'll see a huge shift in. You're going to see all of the efficiencies come
Hmm.
through. A lot of it was all based on human understanding, which is great, but one human understanding or a team of humans is different than AI access to all of the data that it has access to, which is quite a lot of data. Right
Hmm.
now, you're looking at those efficiencies under a very large microscope, and you're
Mm.
able to see this over here worked for these companies that I've never even heard of. And it was a massive, massive growth change for them. Let's
Sure.
implement those things that apply to our business. I think that's going to be huge. Just accessing like the data, knowledge, that's huge. That'll be a
Hmm.
shift.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. Which I guess, you said something earlier around, the tools that give you access to real time data. What do you think has, why do you think certain leadership teams within franchise brands, why do they delay or, postpone investing in the tools that give them real time data? What do you think it is?
Depend on the person, but I think it comes down to of either fear. I think fear is the most important thing right there. It's either lack of understanding, which is fear. So if they don't
Hmm.
understand something, they're afraid that they're either going to not understand it, not be able to catch up with it, not be able to use it, appear to be looking stupid, whatever. Fear of
Yeah.
something, right? So
Hmm.
I think that's a huge area. And then also lack of knowledge. If you don't know what you don't know, or don't
Mm.
know how to use something or the ability out there, then most people don't adopt. They don't even try because they don't know. How
Mm.
would they be able to if they don't have any idea? So I think
Yeah.
that stops a lot of people. Maybe sort of cost or something like that is, of course, always a factor for a lot of businesses.
Yeah, one that we hear more often, it's not a priority from a sort of investment perspective. There are other things that they feel like they need to do beforehand. But do you think that is in the age of AI and having your data in a much more in a cleaner state so that it is actually able to help you to make better decisions and make decisions in real time? Do you think that is likely to move up the priority list for franchise leadership teams that have maybe been keeping that lower on the list, or do you think that, or don't you think that that's going to change just because of AI?
I think it's going to change. Truly, I think this is probably one of the ones that would actually make a shift, where a quicker shift. I think it's always changes. Typically, people they won't do something. They'll move up the priority list when it becomes a problem. When it
Yeah,
becomes a major pain point, that's when it moves. Now it's like, oh my gosh, I have to do this right now. Well, it takes
sure.
time. But this is
Yeah.
one of those things that I think it's so quantifiable and not quantifiable at the same time, but it's so quantifiable because you can really use it to make major shifts in your business. We're not talking like little tiny percentages. We're
Yep.
talking major shifts that how can they ignore it? I do think there are legacy people or brands or whatever, and I use that term very lightly, that may shy away from it,
Hmm.
just because they are like, how do I turn this giant cruise ship? How do I make that nimble of a change so quickly?
Sure.
Well, it's a lot quicker than and a lot more there's a lot more capabilities than they might think now
Yeah.
with how AI is. And it's so very many use cases and, flexibility and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, which reminds me of two things that we see a lot. One is, you know, I mean, and I know you were using the term legacy sort of more broadly. And for those folks listening who aren't familiar with that term, it's so, legacy is brands that have made the decision to grow more slowly and have a longer term sort of view that's not all about growing quickly and selling or whatever it is. So there's the other thing that we see that's kind of related to this question is, what is the difference between franchise leadership teams that are proactive and franchise leadership teams that are reactive?
You saw this during COVID a lot. The franchise companies that are the people that were very proactive in the changes that they made instead of the reactive ones were ultimately the ones that thrived, not survived. They thrived. The other
Hmm.
ones, they still survived. Some of them did, some of them didn't.
Right.
But this is a big area. If you're proactive and you can see further down the road of how something that this change that you make today
Yeah.
or what's coming down the pipe, you can make changes now, you're going to start thriving. You're going to be ahead of the game. If you're just reacting, it's like a fire. The fire is already going. You're reacting to the fire. You have to put the fire out now. Well, if you know that there's a high probability of the fire starting, you can
Hmm.
take measures to make sure that the fire doesn't start. It's
Yeah.
kind of the same.
Yeah. 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 Which, and what we even before we started really specializing in the franchise space, we've been implementing CRM systems for mid-market companies in all kinds of industries. And one of the and we see this all. This is not only in the franchising space, right? That you see, different flavors of leadership teams that some that are more proactive and others that are more reactive. But the one thing that it often comes down to is, which leans more on the reactive side, is leadership teams the pain of change
Mm,
has to be less than the pain that they're going to endure if they don't change, right? And that's often measured, like, quantified financially. But it's interesting how they haven't actually quantified what it might cost them if they don't make the change sooner. Because and it sort of touches on a few things we've already talked about, which is, if you suddenly, and of course the bigger the brand, in other words, if you're at 500 units, it's going to be more important than if you're at 200 units, and if at 200 is bigger than if you're at 40 units, because if you have 200 units, for example, that and where the franchisees aren't necessarily, they don't feel supported, and they feel frustrated every day that they don't have the tools to do what to do and run their business profitably. That's going to be very painful, right?
mhm.
Whereas if you were able to fix this before you got to that point, then not only would it, not to your point, not only would it be more frictionless, but these franchisees would all be thriving, and therefore the whole network would be thriving. So what do you think it is that's is not happening, that they're not quantifying the potential pain of not building these systems sooner, that'll help everybody grow more easily once the new system is in place?
What do I'm sorry. So what do I think? What was the question in there?
Yeah,
I
like,
missed that.
yeah. So,
I was
like,
thinking too much about what you were saying.
yeah. So what are they missing as far as doing the calculation of, like, if we don't make this change, it could, they're not quantifying, like, all the help that they're going to have to provide with time that they don't have, because they haven't yet hired the people to support the franchisees. And that the whole thing is just extremely painful, right? Of, like, where you have franchisees contacting corporate every single day saying, I'm not getting the support that I need. This is not working. That's not working. You know, you're not giving me the data that I need, because
Mhm.
the system isn't working. Why does how, why aren't they able to quantify that at the corporate level? The, because the cost of putting a system in place to make that pain go away is not that great compared to the pain that they're enduring every day, having to deal with unhappy franchisees. Not to mention the fact that they won't be able to sell any more units if that's the state of the brand.
Yeah, so why would they not do that? So I think they're very focused. I mean, everybody's going to be, again, a little bit different on this topic, but I think that they are very focused elsewhere. Their mind is, depending on the role, let's say my mind, it would be on growth. I'm worried about bringing on new franchisees. That's my whole mindset, not me personally, but
Sure.
that's my
The
role.
friend
I'm
of, yeah,
the fran dev. I am, and even a lot of leaders, that's the whole way that they,
everything is
their
around
business is
friend of.
growing. They're
Yeah.
yeah, they're it's all framed up. Well, what about the franchisees we've already got, and how happy they are and all of that. They don't see that if you keep those guys happy, that whole organization improves and grows, including Fran Dev. The happier the franchisees you already have, the better it is, the easier it is to get more franchisees, those sorts of things. So
Yeah.
maybe not focusing on the right areas and getting too focused on your own little box. That's another
Mhm.
area. So people do tend to stay in their box. Like, this is my world. Here's my blinders. I'm going to only look at whatever my world is, and
Yeah.
I'm not gonna see how if I make this shift, it's going to affect everything else. I think that's a huge thing. I think that adoption's huge. Like, you know, they do worry about time and effort to put into launching a new like system of some sort, some
Mhm.
technology system,
Yeah.
and not understand that yes, today, tomorrow, and then a couple of weeks or how long it is to roll out this new system is going to be painful.
Sure.
But that pain is now going to quantify into all this time and effort I'm saving, my team is saving, and also it's going to help my franchisees in the case of a franchisor. And how are they going to become more profitable? How are they going to become more efficient? And how are they going to scale the business better? I don't know.
Mhm.
Why don't they look like that? I think it's a variety of reasons that holds them back from that.
Yeah. And I was just thinking, like, if you kept sort of going down that value chain that you were kind of
Uh-huh.
thinking through there, if they did all that, it, to the point you made earlier, it would help the Fran Dev team too, because as soon as they have, happy existing franchisees, it's going to be so much easier for them to sell, additional units because they're going to be, getting referrals and all the other things. And when a new franchisee is interviewing and existing franchisees, they're going to be getting good feedback versus, yeah, this might not be the one for you to invest in. So again, it's everything seems to come back down. If you're measuring how to make your existing franchisees successful, the rising tide sort of floats all boats. Sally, okay, so as we wrap up here, what is one more word of advice that you'd like to leave our listeners with? Again, from your 30 years of franchise perspective and where you see things going forward, what is the advice you would have?
I think that if I could tell, and kind of as a twofold piece of advice, first, slow down to understand whatever it is that you're dealing with, whether it's implementing a new software system, whatever it is. This could be used in so many different ways. First, slow
Mhm.
down to understand. Then you listen to understand as well. So I want to listen. I want to gather data. I want to understand what's I'm fully seeing. Once I
Mhm.
do both of those things, I think gathering that information, then I can make a thoughtful decision about where I'm going next, whether it's changing the direction of my franchise company, implementing a new software system. How it allows those really thoughtful pause allows you to tap into your gut. And we all have gut feelings that if we were to pay attention to them would lead us down the right path. And so
Mhm.
I would say number one advice for today.
Yes, I think that's really good advice. Because I think one of the other great things that happens when you pause is you reflect on what you've already achieved. And
Mhm.
whereas too many of us get caught up on where we're going and we forget about what we've already achieved. But when you look back during that pause and reflect on what you've achieved, that often gives you the answers and the confidence to where you're going.
True. Yeah. That's great. That's a great point. Yeah.
Yes. Sally, thank you so much. It's been really good to have you on, and I'll be watching. I know this it could take a few months still, but I really look forward to seeing your book come out next year, and of course, I look forward to seeing where you land here soon once you find the right fit.
All right. I appreciate it. And thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Sally.